Assalamu alaikum. Today is our 9th lecture of Global Business Management. The learning objectives of today's lecture are to understand the patterns of FDI, and the second learning objective of today's lecture is understand the political ideology and FDI. What are the basic political ideologies across the countries have for the foreign direct investment. And the last one is what are the costs and benefits of foreign direct investment. Before we proceed with those learning objectives, first we are going to recap the last lecture. What is meant? In the last lecture we have discussed the basic definition of foreign direct investment, which is a firm investment directly in few facilities to produce or to market in a foreign country. Whatever the investment when firm does in a foreign country in terms of production or providing the services, this is called foreign direct investment. When a firm conducts foreign direct investment, that firm is considered as multinational firm. FDI can be in the form of greenfield investment or merger and acquisition. What is meaning of greenfield investment? The establishment of a wholly new operation in a foreign country. If we take the example of greenfield investment is the investment which is carried out from the scratch to the final product. All the production processes will be carried out in the foreign market. That company will go to the foreign market and build a production unit, production facility, and they start making their products. The whole processes of the products will be carried out in that market. This is called greenfield investment. And on the other hand, there is another type that's called merger and acquisition. Acquisition or these are the mergers with the existing firms in that country, in the foreign country. They are going to collaborate, and ownership can vary according to the contract, but they conduct their business with the collaboration of that with that existing firm in that country. Okay, the next term that we had studied in the last lecture was the flow of FDI, which refers to the amount of FDI undertaken over the given period of time. Normally it is considered as in terms of years. And the next one is a stock of FDI. Stock of FDI refers to the total accumulated value of foreign owned assets at a given time. Total foreign assets in a given time. And the last one is the gross fixed capital formation. Gross fixed capital formation mean that FDI in physical assets or fixed assets in terms of stores, factories, office buildings, and this sort of investment is considered as gross fixed capital investment. Okay. In the recent years, if we have experienced this thing, we learned this thing that in the recent years FDI has grown rapidly, and there are several reasons behind this the rapid growth. The first one is the firms still fear the threat of protectionism. Because of this, firms are going out. The next one is that democratic political institutions and free market economies have encouraged FDI. There are, because of the change in political regimes in several countries, for instance the Soviet Union, former for Eastern European blocs, and liberalization processes within developing countries, especially India, China, Brazil, South Korea, South Africa, and the Far East Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam, Philippines. In these countries, these countries have undergone several financial reforms, and because of these reforms, a lot of firms are going in and out from those countries. The last point is globalization is forcing firms to maintain a presence around the world. Like we said, that because of these financial reforms and other factors, firms are entering in several markets. They are trying to make sure their presence in all over the globe. When these firms, these multinational firms, they are making their presence in all over the globe, it gives the or increases the competition in those domestic markets, and because of that increased competition, domestic firms operating in those markets are forced or pushed to go out from those domestic market and in search of new growth opportunities in foreign markets. There is another reason they are saying that changes in economic and political change, and the third one may seems the the typical example is Spain's Telefonica is pursuing opportunities in Latin America and Europe, and because of Spain's Telefonica is pursuing other opportunities in rest of the Europe because of these the formation of European Union, and they have lifted up all the trade barriers and tariffs and European Economic Union. These of the treaties and agreement across the countries also facilitated firms to go out. And the last one is many manufacturers are expanding into foreign countries to take advantage of the lower cost labor. Like we have discussed the example of facilities or firms which are going out in the Chinese and developing countries. Especially this aspect is pertinent to the developing countries. These firms are going out, the European firms from the developed countries, they are going out in the developing countries in search of a cheap labor and cheap resources. China has become a hot spot for firms that are attracted to the country's low wage rate and low in the large market. So another aspect is because of these growth opportunities, in search of that growth opportunities these firms not only trying to avail the benefits of cheap labor, they're also trying to cater or try to capitalize the growth opportunities or market potential in those developing countries. Like these are really big countries like Russia, China, India. These are really huge Far East countries situated in the Far East Asian region. These are the really large countries, and they are a big market potential for the multinational companies to exploit. So they go out, and rather than importing exporting from European countries or USA to those countries, what they are doing, they are trying the new pattern. They are doing FDI. They are producing those products in those markets, in these developed third world countries market, and selling to these customers, to the same countries. Okay, firm prefer to acquire existing assets. Why they prefer to acquire existing assets? Like they prefer to do the merger and acquisition rather than FDI, because merger and acquisition are quicker to execute than greenfield investment. Of course, there are less procedures involved in acquisition mergers compared to the greenfield investment. It is easier and perhaps less risky for a firm to acquire desired assets than build them from the ground up. The second point, first one is a more quicker, second one is less riskier, less an investment involved, because greenfield investment involves a huge investment, and merger that can be possible with the less investment compared to greenfield investment, and it is considered as less riskier, because firms believe that they can increase the efficiency of acquired unit by transferring capital, technology, and management skill. The third point is the companies are preferring mergers because they think that when they acquire a new company in that market, they will increase the technological level or technological efficiency of that company, or they can increase the efficiency through higher management skills, or they can also increase the efficiency of that company with the injection of more or new capital. Okay, another aspect we had discussed was the export or license or FDI. Why firms prefer to have licensing or exporting over FDI? Because for export, the main reason is trade barriers. and look cost of transportation. To avoid these two things, the firms prefer to do the FDI rather than export. And for the licensing, the most important element of licensing is if the nature of that product or nature of that firm or industry is high-tech sector, or they are producing some pharmaceutical innovative products, or the computer, or some chip related things, or microprocessor related things, or biotechnology, then they prefer to do the FDI rather than do the merger or acquisition, rather than doing the licensing, because it's very difficult for them to control this standard or transformation of the technology. They cannot maintain that level. The second thing is, if their competitive advantage of that firm lies in the higher management and processes, like Toyota or Japanese automobile or German automobile companies, they had this competitive advantage and they exploited this competitive advantage, and they captured the automobile industry around the world because of these factors. And these companies, because of these factors, cannot be licensed to other companies. I mean, you cannot give the license to other company that you can use this, you can have, or you can maintain or build the same level of management skill that we have. It's not possible. That's why they do the FDI rather than licensing. The next theory, the next point that we had discussed was what is the internationalization theory which can explain the flow of FDI. The internationalization theory, which is also known as the market imperfection theory, suggests that licensing has three major drawbacks. The first, it could give a valuable technological know-how to the potential foreign competitor, like we said. When the first thing is, when they do the licensing of the high-tech sector in the height of their technology, then there is a probability, most probable, it is most likely that these firms are going to replicate that technology, or they are going to absorb that technology, and soon they will be a competitor of that firm, like it happened in RCA, US firm got the licensed its color TV technology to the Sony in Japan. And what happened, Japan, the Sony learned that technology, and they started to build their own televisions rather than building through the license. The second one is, doesn't give a firm the control over manufacturing, marketing, and strategy in the foreign country. That's true. The third one is, firm's competitive advantage may be based in management, marketing, and manufacturing capability. Toyota competitive advantage is embedded in their culture. These things are more focused on the culture. Okay, now what are the patterns of foreign direct investment that we observe around us? The first, why do firms in the same industry, the question that we have to think about is, why do firms in the same industry undertake FDI at about the same time and the same locations? The thing is, the question that people or scholars that they are facing right now is, firms have operating in the same industry, but when they are thinking to go out of the domestic market, might be some firms will go to the developed countries, some firms will go to the developing country, and even within the developing country, might be one will prefer China over India, and the second one will go to the Far East Asian countries. How or what sort of theories can explain this sort of difference in their choices of FDI or decision of FDI? Okay, the first theory, we tried to explain this thing was the Knickerbocker theory, and this is the name of the philosopher who suggests that firms follow their domestic competitor overseas. And FDI flows are a reflection of strategic rivalry between the firms in a global marketplace. It's one saying that this theory, the Knickerbocker is trying to say that when firms decide to go out of the domestic market, they also, when they are making this decision, they also consider the decisions of their rival firms, which are rival firms that are operating in the same industry. These are their rival firms, and when they see that if their rival firm is going in, for instance, is if we consider the example of USA, if USA firm is going, one firm observed that its competitor is going in China, then of course that according to this theory, these firms will follow the same pattern as the industry is doing. Mean whatever their rivals are doing, they are doing the same. If they are going to China, they will go to China. And why they are trying to do or trying to follow that thing? The main argument, the rationale this guy is providing is they are saying this: if that company will succeed in China, they will get more revenue. Of course, they will capture a new market, and their production level will be increased. Of course, overall productivity will be increased, and overall profitability will be increased in the market of that firm. So that means that rival firm will increase their overall revenue, and they can use these resources to combat the other firm. So before they do this thing, in order to control this thing, they immediately follow that firm, and they will stop them, or they will compete even in China simultaneously on the same time. This sort of pattern is more pertinent or visible in the oligopolistic market, where oligopolistic market, you are aware of this term, that market structure where 80% of the market control or market capitalization is in the hand of only 2-3 firms. Like the example of airplanes industry, and only the Boeing and Airbus, they have the 90% control of this air jet industry. Like and we have this thing, soft drink, Coke and Pepsi, they have majority of their control. The market capitalization lies in the hand of only these two countries, in these two companies. And we can say that, and important thing is, if firm A, for instance, in USA, in one industry there are 3 firms A, B, C, and firm A intends to go to China, then firm B and C will do the same thing, and they are trying to follow the firm A. Why? Again, because it might be the profitability of A will increase, and they use that extra revenue, extra money to combat the companies B and C in USA. The next point is, when 2 or more enterprises encounter each other in the different regional market, national market or industries, mean they try to maintain the same competition. Whatever they are facing in the domestic market, they try to maintain the same competition level in the other market. Like we are saying, we are just giving the example, continuing the example of the ABC firms of USA, they go from USA to China. We are saying that they are facing the same intention. The competition level, whatever they are facing in USA, they will try to, they expect that they want this thing, they want to have the same level of competition in China, in national market and international market. They intend to have the same competition. For example, Toyota and Nissan responded to investment of Honda when Honda went to the European market, especially the UK. Toyota and Nissan responded in the same way. They established their units in Europe as well. Similarly, Electrolux, the Swedish company, when why they went out of their Swedish borders? They went out because their competitors, the GE, General Electrics, and the Whirlpool, they were going out of their domestic boundaries, and they were exploiting the opportunities exist in the foreign market. They were doing this thing, and that's why the Electrolux, they followed their rivals as well, and they did the same thing. Okay, the next theory or next guy who tried to explain this thing is Vernon. We had already discussed the theory of the Vernon, which is the life cycle of the products, and quickly I rephrase what is the meaning of life cycle of the product, and what this theory says. This theory says, with the passage of time, as the product matures, the location of sale and location of production changes, and with the passage of time, the countries who started to produce and started to export the products, that country start in the end of that product product phase, a product life cycle, that country started to import that product from other countries because of the low production cost of that product compared to whatever they are incurring the cost in their own countries. And we had discussed the example of Xerox, how Xerox entered in USA. They started to produce that product in the USA, and subsequently they went to the European market, and later on when they observe that the level of competition is increased in the European market, in a way we can say that when there are other producers of photocopier machine in the Europe, and they are trying to provide the better cost or better quality of the products, these companies, these Xerox, try to go to the developing countries and try to exploit the opportunities in the developing countries. And so in the ending stage of the product, they were, rather than exporting the products to the developing countries, Xerox was importing the products from the developing countries to USA. This theory did well to explain when the demand of the country support the production and the shift to low custom markets when competition is high. We said that, we had already discussed that when the products are invented in the USA, this theory explains well, this theory fits well, and when the competition is high and production is low, this theory explains well, but it fails to explain why do firms prefer FDI when export license is profitable because economies of scale. This theory cannot explain the concept that a situation when firm, like for instance, we can continue the example of Xerox, like when the Xerox company, which is the US company, they started to export the product in the initially they were serving only the US market. Subsequently they started to export the product in the European market, and then when they realized that production demand is high, they started to build their facility. They did the FDI in Europe and started to produce that photocopy machine in Europe and serving those countries. And subsequently those European countries absorbed, learned the technology, and they started to produce their own photocopy machines, and later on the competition will be got higher. But the question arises at this point is, when this Xerox observed that the demand is higher in the European market, and they decided to do the FDI, or they decided to produce that photocopy machine in Europe. Why they did do that? Why couldn't they just export? They increase the level of export if they have if the demand was higher. Because they were ignoring one concept that was missing from this theory, is they were ignoring the concept of economy of scale. If the demand of that product was higher, then why don't they just produce at a larger scale in USA and just export that product? Why don't they do that? Because the overall cost, per unit cost of that photocopy machine will be reduced because of the higher quantity of the production. These things that this theory couldn't explain, and that's why scholars trying to find out other things, other theories, other rationale to explain this FDI flow. Okay, in pursuit of answer of this question, why firms are following such a certain pattern of FDI, there is another British scholar called John Dunning, who belongs to the University of Reading in UK. He proposed an electric paradigm which is based on location-specific advantages. This electric paradigm is based on location-specific advantages. What does this mean? It arises, location-specific advantages arises when the using resources and endowments or assets that are tied to a particular location that a firm finds valuable to combine with its own unique assets, like in Electrolux and China. This theory is fundamentally is based on the concept of location advantages. Location advantages, important thing is location. If a firm, when they decide to do some FDI, they are going to use their own skill set there are competitive advantages, whatever they have, the management and other things, the resources or capital, they have this sort of resources. And the second thing is they also consider the location advantages exist in that foreign market. For instance, they are giving the example of Electrolux. They have the better management and process production capabilities, production skills, higher technology and higher management skills, but they went to the China to exploit the low cost wages, and this low cost wages was not available in Sweden. What they did, they tried, and this low cost wages are low production, low cost of the raw materials, whatever used for the Electrolux, mean these low cost of resources and low cost of labor, this is only specific and firms can only find in certain markets, in certain locations. To avail those benefits, firm have to move to that location, and this is called the location specific advantages. These advantages can lie in this direct in terms of low cost wages or in terms of resources, and the second that can be possible in terms of resources, natural resources like natural resources, oil, gas and mineral, this sort of things, and firms have to go only to those markets where on those locations where these countries or those markets, those locations are and blessed with such resources. The second concept which this theory focuses is the externalities. Externalities mean knowledge spillovers that occurs when the companies in the same industry locate in the same area. Firms willing to take advantage of low-cost labor. Knowledge spillovers that occurs when in the same industry looking mean the important point. This externalities mean the spillover. Spillover mean, for instance, if this Electrolux firm went to the China, they started to produce their production. They did the FDI. They started to make their, for instance, the vacuum cleaners. This vacuum cleaners there in China. What happened? Might happen that this technology, the local domestic firms are going to learn this technology. How they are going to do that? First of all, the people who are working there in Electrolux company in China, they are local people, of course Chinese people. They can switch their job and they can move this knowledge, this skill, know-how of this technology to other industries, to the domestic firms. And the second thing is, of course, this Electrolux is also associated with some suppliers. Of course, some suppliers are associated with them who are providing this, the resources, raw material to them, the distributors, the marketers, all these things. Of course, these connections, these supply chain elements are associated with these foreign companies, multinational companies, and they are benefited with the higher technology or higher management of that multinational companies. And because of these are called spillovers. Mean these externalities mean these things, these other spillover, this supply chain factor, these the entities who are associated with the supply chain, with the multinational companies, they are get benefited with the high technology and the better management and processes. And the second thing is, firms willing to take, if the firm is willing to take advantage of low skill, they are going to go to the China. If they are going to avail to the natural resources, they are willing to exploit the natural resources, they are going to those markets where natural resources exist. For instance, they are firms who are in search of the oil and gas, they will travel to the Gulf countries. And if firm is willing to learn the high technology, and that firm belongs to the high-tech sector or semiconductor sector, then of course they are going to go to the California, the Silicon Valley of California. Okay, what are the theoretical approaches to FDI? How does a government attitude affect FDI? Now we are going to discuss about what are the different perspectives a government can have towards FDI, which can directly or indirectly affects the level of FDI. You can think of ideology towards FDI as being on a continuum where at one end it is a radical view that hostile to all of it. There is two extremes of government attitudes towards FDI. The first one is the radical attitude, which believes and which see the FDI as a threat to the government, as a hostile, and which they have their policies and policies towards FDI which are hostile. And on the second extreme, there are a free market opinion, free market attitude, and according to which there should not be any intervention of free trade across the countries, which is called free market economies. And in between these two extremes, there is another thinking or ideology which is called pragmatic nationalism, which take the stand in between these two extremes. We will discuss one by one each ideology, and we start with the radical view. Radical view, the traces of this it goes back to the Marxist political and economic theory. Marxism, which is the communist based, the communism is based on this theory. These theories and this political ideology believes in that government will own all the resources, and there will not be any private ownership, and everybody is going to be treated equally. These are the things that this theory is based on. In Marxism, the political revolution on the basis of this thing is experienced in 1917 in Russia. They made the political change on the basis of this ideology. And we are we can see countries who have this ideology are like Cuba, Venezuela, and North Korea, China, and Russia, the USSR, the former Soviet Union, and these countries have this sort of ideology. Cambodia, they have the same ideology. This perspective argues that the multinational companies is an instrument of imperialists' domination, and it means exploiting host countries for the benefit of their capitalist, imperialist home countries. This theory believes that this ideology believes that the multinational companies are used as an instrument. First of all, they believe this thing that these multinational companies which is true, that they belong to the European countries, Western countries, European or US companies. They are, and those countries are the capitalist countries. They are saying that in fact, through these companies, through these multinational companies, this West is penetrating in their market, and they are trying to dominate and exploit the existing resources in the other countries, and they are in fact propagating the capitalist and imperialist agenda. These companies are following on this sort of agenda these are the instrument of imperialist domination. They want to dominate the country. They want to just capture and make the hostage that country on the basis of economic reasons, and ultimately they will control the country, and all these things are happening as on the behalf of capitalist countries. In other words, multinational companies, multinational enterprises will fill an important job with home country citizens, and so control their key technology, leaving the host nation dependent on the capitalist country for investment jobs. And important thing is they are saying, but they have this view that when the companies, these imperialist countries, or we can say these multinational companies, when they enter in other markets, they control the local industries. And when they do so, then of course they are controlling the jobs. they are controlling the investment, they are controlling the technology. I mean, in a way, in a nutshell, the whole country, the economy is controlled by these multinational companies. Okay, there are another category of this sort of countries are, one is the socialist country, like we discussed that they have this sort of opinion, and another sort of category the category of countries who are following the similar approach are the nationalist countries. Who are those nationalist countries? The countries who are following only the national interests. They are not considering the mixing up with the other countries. They are pursuing the nationalist objectives. These nationalist countries can be the example of India, Iran. I mean, these countries are initially they were totally closed, and Iran is still closed their border for the other countries, but gradually they are opening up their borders for the multinational companies, but with the strict control. And since then, the radical stance has been retreated as, okay, nowadays what we are observing that this radical view has been changed. This radical view we observe in Russia, in China, in Iran, in these countries. They had the radical view, but now they are gradually changing. They are shifting their view to radical view to pragmatic view, where they are keeping the balance between the two extremes. Like why they are making this change? The first one is the main obvious reason is the collapse of the Soviet Union, the collapse of Soviet Union. And the second thing is they are observing this thing. People or economies who belong to the developed countries or who were doing the FDI, they are now better off. Their economy is good. They have the better GDP. Their buying power of the people are better compared to the countries who were possessing the radical view and who closed their doors for the multinational companies like US and Russia and China and these sort of countries. And because they are observing the other countries and the big change between the level of the difference between their growth level and their own growth level, and that's why they are changing and shifting their opinion. The next point is the next political ideology which is behind FDI is the free market perspective, which argues that international production should be distributed among countries according to the theory of comparative advantage. What was the theory of comparative advantage? They have to focus on their specialty. Whatever they are producing good, they are specialized with production with something because of their capabilities. They have to be focused on that thing, and otherwise, and they have to export those products to the other countries. And wherever they are lagging behind, or in areas where they don't have the specialty, they are going to import those products. This perspective suggests that countries specialize in the production of goods they can produce more efficiently and trade for everything else. Okay. It then follows that FDI will actually increase the overall efficiency of the global economy. Like we have read this thing that in the previous lectures that this comparative advantage theory is based on positive sum gain. Positive sum gain mean both countries who involve in export and some of course the other country is doing the import, both countries are going to gain from this sort of swap or trade, and this is called positive sum gain. And in that way both the overall efficiency of the global economy will be increased. So if for instance if Ford moves the assembly of some of its cars to the Mexico to take advantage of the cheap labor cost, Ford is not only freeing up resources in the USA which could then be used for the important thing is the Ford also transferring technology. Okay, we are going to see in the both way, like we said, it is a gain from both countries. Like this is the example, we can quote the example of Ford. When Ford went to the Mexico, they shifted their production facilities to the Mexico. What happened? Why they went there? To avail the cheap labor in that market, in the Mexico. To avail the cheap labor, the FDI did the Ford did the FDI in Mexico. What was the positive thing for the USA? Positive thing for USA is, in fact, according to this comparative theory, that Ford is freeing up a lot of resources which were used to produce, which were used by the Ford. Now they freed up those resources. Now that means government can use those resources somewhere else. And what's the gain for Mexico? Mexico is getting the better technology. People are getting the know-how, technological know-how. People are getting job, and they are transferring. In fact, Ford is transferring technology, skills, and capital to Mexico. And in a nutshell, both countries gain from this trade. While no country has fully adopted the problem is, this is good when we see this concept free market perspective, but in reality, no country in this world, the champions of this free market perspective are the USA and UK and the remaining European countries. They are the champion of this free market perspective, but in reality, even those countries didn't adopt the fully free market policies. Why? How? Like we can take the example of US airline industry. Firms cannot do investment FDI. The foreign firms cannot do the FDI in US airline industry more than 25%. This is their restriction. Another example is US television broadcast network is prohibited. Foreign multinational companies cannot invest or cannot undertake the FDI in television broadcast networks. And another aspect which is most important when we talk about the FDI is their national security. Because on the basis of national security, these firms claim, or these firms restrict or deny the FDI to enter in the market. In the middle of these two extremes, the radical and the free market, there is another approach which is called a pragmatic nationalism. Pragmatic nationalism. It argues that the FDI has both positives and negative aspects, both benefits and costs. Benefit include like inflow of capital, technology, skills, job, while costs include the repatriation of profits and negative balance of payment effects. Repatriation of profits. Repatriation of profits mean when, for instance, a firm is investing in Pakistan, a US firm, for instance, we can take the example of a Chinese firm is investing in Pakistan. What going to repatriation of profit mean? Whatever they are making the profit in Pakistan, they will large portion of that profit they will take back to the China. This is called repatriation. Repatriation of profits. They take back the larger sum of the profit to their home countries. This is a negative thing for the host country, of course. The another thing is balance of payment effect. What's the meaning of balance of payment effect? Of course, when the firms are doing the FDI, they are what's happening that they are like, again, for instance, Chinese firms are investing in in Pakistan. How it affects negatively to the Pakistani balance of payment, by Pakistani trade, Pakistani economy. In this negative balance of payment effect can occur in this way that when the Chinese firms are operating or doing the FDI firm some operations in Pakistan, might be, and there is probability, they will import products from their spare parts or some products from China, from their distributing companies. They make a contract with their own distributing companies. Of course, this will exert a negative effect on balance of payment, because balance of payment means this is a collection of import and export. This is a current account. current account the total sum of export and import, and countries prefer to have more export than import. Export will give you a positive impact, the import will give you a negative impact. And when these sort of Chinese, like we are discussing the Chinese example, when they are importing the stuff, because of this company, Pakistan's overall import has increased, and that affects negatively on the overall country's perspective. The pragmatic nationalism suggests that the FDI should only be allowed if the benefit over. Important thing is that these countries, or this philosophy, the pragmatic philosophy, compares the benefits and costs of FDI, and then they have to compare this thing, and they see this. If benefits overweight the costs, then they are going to undertake that investment. Otherwise, they have to reject that investment. We have seen a shift towards a free market stance in recent years. Like we are talking about, we have the radical stance has been shifted to at least to pragmatic nationalist approach. And you already know, of course, that along with that shift, there has been a surge in FDI. Because of this shift, the countries change their stance from radical to pragmatic or free market stance, like India, China, Russia, Cuba. Iran is trying to do that. India has done this thing. These countries have changed, and they are involved in the FDI activity, and because of this involvement, the overall level of FDI around the globe has been increased. Countries compete with each other to attack. Nowadays, countries compete with each other to attract FDI. They are competing with each other, they are providing facilities, they are tempting, they are providing benefits, they are providing subsidies, tax exemptions, this sort of things they are providing to multinational companies to come to their country. They are welcoming to the multinational companies, and not only welcoming, they are welcoming in by providing them financial benefits like tax exemptions or some subsidies or some protection or this sort of things. Like Britain, a very famous example is Britain attracted Nissan, Toyota, Honda in 1980s and 90s, and Britain provided them a corridor to enter in the rest of the European countries, to export their product. Still it's what they are doing, these Japanese automobile companies, that they're exporting their cars from UK to rest of the Europe. This UK is act like a base for these Japanese companies in order to operate in the Europe. Keep in mind though that FDI is still viewed with hostility in some countries and in some situations. Despite these things, still there are some restrictions FDI is facing in certain countries and for certain industries. The specific example is the IBM and Texas Instrument, which are the semiconductor industry. They went to the Japan because of this high-tech sector. They went to the Japan for doing the FDI activity in high technology sector, and they were facing that they were sort of a ban or some sort of a restriction for high-tech instruments in selling in Japan. As the management focus in your text outline, this is the management focus case study which is provided in your book. The US recently rejected an effort by DP World to invest in US ports. One example is provided in the book that US denied any sort of FDI in their ports, for an investment in their ports, because on the basis of security concerns. Okay, this is the one example of the Walmart of FDI. And Walmart of FDI, this is a small case study of FDI of Walmart, who is a world largest retailer in the world, and they are basically belong to the USA, and the quick summary of this this Walmart expansion is like that they have initially they have the stores around the only around the states within the USA. Firms were the pioneer in the hub and spoke distribution system. They have a special distribution system within the within their stores, and central distribution warehouses, and that means they are connected. Their retail stores are connected with their distributors, and warehouses were strategically located to serve clusters of stores. This helped drive down the inventory and logistic costs. The firm was also one of the first to utilize a computer-based information system to track inventories, in-store inventory sales, transmit the information to suppliers. The information provided by these systems was used to determine the pricing and stocking strategy and to better manage inventories. They were the first retailers or first companies who introduced the information system which was connected with their retailer with their suppliers, and the suppliers, they automatically know the stock position. If there's some products are the number of products are going down, they ship those products immediately to those stores, and they've on the basis of this information system, automatically the need of products and the price of products and the sale promotion stuff, this sort of things they automatically control, and the information provided by this system used to determine the pricing, stocking strategy, and to better manage inventories. Today, Walmart is still a leader in information system. All Walmart, the stores, distribution centers, and sophisticated information systems and communication. That these things are all the stores are equipped with this with state-of-the-art management information system. And despite this success within the country, in 1991 Walmart was accounting significant problems with 1,568 stores nationwide. Its growth prospects in the United States were looking some limited. Walmart decided to try to expand their operation outside the USA and build a global brand. They wanted in 91 when they foresee that might be the market growth within the USA will be limited in the future. What they decided to went out of the domestic border, and they tried to explore the markets in the foreign countries. The company concluded that if its competitive advantages based on the combination of the culture and the sporting information and the logistic system and the culture. The important thing is they know this thing, that the competitive advantage of this Walmart lies in their culture, in their culture of management and in information system. On the basis of this thing, Walmart decided that it is not possible for them to do the licensing mode. What they could do, like we had already discussed this thing, when it's difficult, when the competitive advantage of a firm lies in their management or in their processing, then it will be really difficult to control that management, marketing, or these processes. And rather what they do, these firms prefer to adopt the FDI mode. In 1992, the Walmart began its foreign adventure by establishing 6 stores in Mexico. By the end of 1997, it had 402 stores in that country, along with the 144 in Canada, 13 in Puerto Rico, 9 in Argentina, 8 in Brazil, 3 in China, and 3 in Indonesia. Purchases. They also purchased the 21 Worldkauf hypermarket stores in Germany, and its first venture in the Europe. As a part of the entry strategy, once it has been established or the acquired a store in the foreign country, Walmart transfers some of its US associates to that store for 2 or 3 years to help establish the back office system and to transfer the Walmart culture so that the new associates. Okay, so the strategy seems to be working. Walmart international stores contributed over 5 billion in sales to the company's 120 billion revenue in 1997, and they are already posting profits. The important thing is that Beside this sort of FDI, they were also they transferred their managers, top manager, for 3 to 5 years in new locations, so that they could transfer their management skill, management strategy in the new countries, in the new markets. And because of this sort of strategy, their FDI is producing, like in 1997 only, 5 billion out of their total 1 billion revenue. They generated 5 billion from the foreign markets. The questions that you had to think about is, there are two sort of questions that you need to think, and in order to what are the competitive advantages of Walmart, and to what extent their strategy of FDI was successful. In order to answer these questions, what you have to do, you guys have to read this case study once again, and you have to read this case study line by line and see what are the competitive advantages of Walmart. In order to see this thing, you can read this case study, and you can check on the internet who are their competitors and what are their competitive strategy. Competitive advantage is always observed or seen with reference to their competitors in the same the companies, the firms operating in the same industry, what they don't have and they have. This is comparative advantage, and you can search the positive thing or their strengths of their competitor as well. To what extent their strategy FDI was successful? That's like we had observed this. It's written in 1997. Their profit was 5 billion out of 120 billion was coming from the foreign markets. That was, of course, the first indication of their success. But later on, you can see on the internet, you can Google this thing, and might be on the Wikipedia or other resources. Might be on their own websites. They have posted the financial statement in the last 5 or 7 years, and you can see the net income or the gross profit or the net income of this company, of the Walmart, over the last 5-7 years. It will shows their level of success. And of course, when they are mentioning their revenues, they also provide the foreign revenues in the separate heading in their balance sheet and income statements. There are some review questions for this chapter. The first one is, the establishment of a wholly new operation in a foreign country is called an acquisition, a merger, a greenfield investment, a multinational venture. You can think about these questions, and in the next lecture, or we can discuss these answers. Or second option is, you can find the answer of these questions in the previous slides and in the book as well. The amount of FDI undertaken over a given period of time is known as the flow of FDI, the stock of FDI, FDI outflow, or FDI inflow. These are the 4 options. You have to think really hard, and you have to check the previous slides. Answer is already available there. Most FDI is direct towards developed countries, emerging economies, the United States and China. We had discussed this thing in the graphical representation of the FDI pattern. We have shown this thing that with the help of graph, that where this FDI is more directly towards. Okay, advantages that arises from using the resource endowments or the assets that are tied to a particular location and that a firm finds valuable to combine with its own unique assets are: first mover advantage, location advantages, externalities, or property advantages. We have discussed this concept in 4 or 5 slides before, and you should be able to answer this question. We just did it. Benefit of FDI include all of the following except the resource transfer effect, the employment effect, the balance of payment effect, the national sovereignty, and the autonomy. We already done this thing in just a few minutes ago, and you should be able to answer this question. Okay, now there is a summary of the lecture. Why do firms in the same industry undertake the FDI at about the same time and same location. This is the first thing that we had discussed, why firms go to the same industry and the same location. And in order to answer this question, there are certain philosophers, scholars, who try to answer this question. The first one is a Knickerbocker, who said this thing that firms follow their domestic competitors overseas. They are and this is more pertinent in the oligopolistic market, where firms are following their competitors, and they are following whatever their competitors doing. If they are going abroad in certain market, they will do the same thing. And like for instance, Toyota and the Nissan responded to the investment of Honda when the Honda went to the European countries or the USA. The Toyota and Nissan did the same thing. Electrolux responds to the GE and a Whirlpool. Okay, the next philosopher was the Vernon. We had done this thing, the life cycle of the product, and he is explaining this thing on the basis of life cycle of the product. When demand of the country, this theory okay, when demand of the country supports the production and shift production to low cost markets when competition is high, it fails to explain that why firms do FDI when export license is profitable. And the next theory is the Dunning's electric paradigm. It is important to consider the location specific advantages. This theory is mainly concentrating or focusing on the location specific advantages, which arises from this arises from the using resource endowment asset that are tied to the particular location, and that a firm finds valuable to combine its own unique assets. I mean, like in what the Electrolux is doing in China. Our externalities are the spillovers that firms gain. Firms and the host or home country both gain from the FDI. How does a government's attitude affects the FDI? There are three sort of government attitude, government philosophies that can directly and indirectly affects the FDI activity. The first one is the radical view. Radical view believes this thing that the FDI is the instrument of imperialist domination, and the means of exploiting host countries for the benefit of their capitalist imperialist home countries. Mean they are just considering that the FDI is a source of negative thing, and these capitalist countries are trying to capture the economies of the other countries with the help of the multinational companies. But and another stance is the nationalist people. They are thinking in the same way, but for the sake of their own country, they are believing in this way. The examples of the national countries are the Iran and the India. World is changing, and they are changing their views. This is very difficult to find. The only few countries that they still believe in the radical view is the typical example is in North Korea. The next concept is the free market perspective, which argues that the international production should be distributed among countries according to the theory of comparative advantage. This perspective suggests that the countries specialize in the production of the goods they can produce most efficiently and trade for everything else. In that way, it then follows the FDI actually increases the overall efficiency of the global economy, not fully important thing is this free economy. That perspective says that the country should focus on their production of specialty, but important thing is that the champion of this free market perspective are the European and the US and the UK countries. But despite their claim, they are not fully embraced this concept. The third, the concept which is in between those extreme views is the pragmatic nationalism, which argues that FDI has both benefits and cost, and the countries have to compare the benefit and cost, and if the benefit overweights the cost, then that investment should be undertaken. Otherwise, all the other foreign direct investments should be rejected. And the benefits includes things like inflow of capital, technology, skills, and jobs, while costs include the repatriation of profit and negative balance of payments effects. The pragmatic nationalists suggest that the FDI should only be allowed if the benefit overweigh the cost. This is the basic thing that the pragmatic theory suggests. In the next lecture, we are going to see the impact of what is the costs and benefits of this FDI on the host country and the home country. Specifically, we are going to see the positive aspects of FDI on host country and the negative things of FDI on host country. Then we are going to see the same aspect, the positive and negative aspect for the home country as well. Later on, what are the different instrument countries use to attract or reject, or we can say to just repel the FDI from their countries. These are the two main aspects, and then we are going to see what is the implication of this FDI and how the managers do the decision of FDI. These are the three main important topics we are going to see in the next lecture. Thank you for today. Allah Hafiz.